Greetings and salutations, my friend. Not long ago I asked you what topic you would like me to cover next, and it seems that a lot of you were interested in me talking about transhumanism. And so your wish is granted. It looks like I created myself a proper little democracy on this channel. And I can guarantee you one thing, that the elections on this channel are not rigged.
I have to inform you that this algorithm I created has been very efficient at influencing the voters' opinions, even more than I anticipated. And the bots we created were just the cherry on the top.
So, in this video, I will present to you 8 common myths and misconceptions about transhumanism. Now, I want to mention 2 things real quick before we start. The list of the misconceptions here is primarily based on my own personal experience as a transhumanist and the accusations and criticism I am receiving, so it's based on actual arguments I hear a lot of the time, and those I think are the most common one. If you as a transhumanist receive other arguments and hear a lot of misconceptions that is not on this list, or if there is something you are as a non-transhumanist are curious about that is not on this list, let me know. I might cover it in the future. Now, the second thing is that I can obviously speak only for myself, so I will use I instead of we, because I don't think that all transhumanists think alike. I'm an individualist. I don't really believe in collective identity. Don't think that all transhumanists think like this. I think there's a huge variety of different kinds of thinking and different goals from transhumanists as well. So I will focus on what my personal opinions are. I do not speak for every transhumanist out there. So, myth number 1. Transhumanism is the end of humanity. I'm actually quite surprised by how many people believe that the goal of transhumanism is to either eradicate humans, or that eradication of humanity will be the final result of transhumanism, no matter the intention. A lot of it boils down to the fact that we will either be replaced by the machine or turn ourselves into machines. So things like transferring our consciousness, or what I actually like to call it, simulation of our consciousness, into a computer, or slowly turning ourselves into a machine through a slow process of synthesis by implementing more and more artificial parts until we cease to be a human. Now, one thing I want you to know is that there is actually a difference between transhumanism and posthumanism, and a lot of the time when people talk about transhumanism, what they're actually thinking is posthumanism. And a lot of the time these two get mixed up, or are sort of existing under one umbrella and are both being referred to as transhumanism. Personally, I like to accentuate that difference between the two, because a posthumanism is primarily based in the fact that we should rise above being human. Like, that the final destination, or I wouldn't even call it final destination, because of course there's a further road ahead from that, but eventually at some point we should upgrade ourselves to the point where we actually stop being humans. Hence why post-human. Now, posthumanism is not really something I personally support. I'm sort of in opposition to posthumanism. Instead, I support making improvements to the state and the condition of humanity. Now, I came across this one video from Big Think, where this media theorist, Douglas Rushkoff, I think his name was talking about this concept of uploading our minds to the computer or to some other artificial or mechanical vessel.
The confidence with which we think we can upload ourselves to silicon or recreate ourselves with algorithms is shocking to me. The only ones out there who think they know what human consciousness is are computer engineers. If you talk to actual brain researchers and neuroscientists, they say we're nowhere close.
This one I actually absolutely agree with. I think there are big limits to what we know, what we can know currently, at least, about the nature of consciousness, and that's one of the reasons why this is such a popular debate, at least in the sphere of philosophy of mind. But he also said something that may paint all transhumanists as posthumanists.
I was on a panel with a famous transhumanist, and he was arguing that it's time that human beings come to accept that we will have to pass the torch of evolution to our digital successors, and that once computers have the singularity and they're really thinking and better than us, then we should really only stick around as long as the computers need us, you know, to keep the lights on and oil their little circuits or whatever we have to do, and then after that, fade into oblivion.
Now, as a transhumanist, I absolutely do not think we should be passing the torch to the machines. I think this is a way of eradicating ourselves, and if this is people's understanding of transhumanism, then of course I can understand where the idea that transhumanism is the end of humanity comes from. What does it actually mean to be transhumanist? And the way I define it is, well, there are two main components or criteria for someone to be a transhumanist. One of them being the belief that technological progress and development will ultimately be beneficial for humanity. And the second is that we should use technology not only to fix ourselves when there is an issue. For example, someone can't hear. Well, let's do something about it so that person can hear. But transhumanism goes beyond that. It is about the expanding the limits of our possibility and ability. So a lot of the time when we're talking about transhumanism, we are talking about expanding those boundaries. And I think it's very important to acknowledge that we are facing a lot of limitations as humans, you know. We are very fragile, we get damaged easily, we get burned by the sun very easily, we are susceptible to viruses, our health span falls down drastically after we reach approximately the age of 48.
The diseases, the chronic progressive diseases of old age, are not really diseases at all. They are not things that can be cured. They are parts of aging. The only difference between column 3 and column 4 is terminology. We have chosen to give some of the aspects of aging disease-like names and not other ones, and that's all.
At that point, your chances of developing a serious illness or disease or some other condition that negatively impacts your life or may even be terminal is much higher. There's sudden rise in that, and I think that is something we should combat. So what I support is expanding our health span, but also our lifespan. I think we should aim to live longer. I support super longevity. I also think that through the use of technology, we should make ourselves more intelligent as well. And now, why do I think that is important? And this is why I stand in a position to posthumanists, because I don't think we should be turning ourselves completely into machines. I rather think that this human progress is necessary to be either equal or above machines, because technology is evolving really fast, at a really fast rate right now, and especially artificial intelligence. And if we do not live up to the same level as artificial intelligence, I think it's worrisome. We are in a race of sorts, and I think that it is very important that we use technology to evolve ourselves. Another important aspect of transhumanism, again, is a very human thing. It's not a machine thing at all, but it's about autonomy. Autonomy over our bodies, autonomy over our lived experience. I think that instead of dying of old age or disease, people should have autonomy over when they wish to die if they choose to do so. I think this type of autonomy will also allow us to have control over our lived experience, such as, well, wouldn't you love to have more control over your sexuality rather than your sexuality controlling you? Wouldn't you like to have more control over your hunger rather than your hunger controlling you? A lot of the time our body is controlling us. And those ideas about having self-control are not exclusive to transhumanism, right? They have existed for a very long time. A lot of the time they're also tied to religion. And religion and transhumanism has something very much in common, that we both acknowledge the limitations of the state of humanity and that we should be improving ourselves. Only that our means of improving ourselves just so happen to be more technological. So no, I don't think transhumanism is the end of humanity. I think it's an important step for the improvement of humanity, but also a necessary step to save humanity. Because without transhumanistic means in the future, we are likely doomed as a species. And we really need to adapt to the ever-changing world. Myth number 2, transhumanism will lead to bigger class differences in society. So the argument goes something like this, right? So we develop a type of technology that expands our abilities. Some people get access to artificial organs that prolong and improve their life. You know, there's the expansion of healthspan and lifespan, super intelligence, super strength, and all of that, right? And then you have this technology being available only to the rich people. So by them having access to this type of technology that improves them while others don't, creates a much bigger economic and social difference, right? And this creates an even bigger gap in that hierarchy there. Now, this one is absolutely understandable and genuine worry to have. Absolutely, no doubt about it. But my impression is that a lot of transhumanists, including myself, do not wish for this type of future. So this is something a lot of us transhumanists are actually very critical about. Most of us really want technology to be available to as many people as possible, ideally everyone. Now what I mean by that is not necessarily that technology and there's implants and gene engineering and biotechnology should be forced upon people, because again, what I said in the previous example, I believe in autonomy, but I think everyone should have access and possibility to that. So no, I don't necessarily think that the possibility of creating this big gap of social and economic difference is necessarily a result of transhumanism, but rather it is a result of the current economic system we are living in. And this type of system could, of course, have an impact of how transhumanist measures would take place. Now, what I think we should do is to work towards avoiding or stopping this type of scenario. But the best way to achieve that is not necessarily by stopping the innovation and the development and the progress. Instead, I think we should make sure that this progress goes in the right direction, that it benefits humanity, but also benefits as many people as possible. So instead, I think we should be taking more political and economical measures to avoid that, rather than to completely eliminate the possibility of technological development that could do a lot of good for humanity. Myth number 3. Transhumanists want eternal bliss. Now, this one, well, my answer to that is both yes and no. Depends which transhumanist. So the concept of eternal bliss is something that David Pearce talks a lot about
rewrite our genetic makeup so that life can be based entirely on information-sensitive gradients of bliss, but not merely is it going to be possible for us to re-engineer ourselves, it will also be possible for us to re-engineer the rest of the living world. Nature at present is essentially red in tooth and claw. A lot of nature consists of immense cruelty, creatures eating each other, but in future it will be possible to enjoy essentially paradise engineering, life animated entirely by gradients of intelligent bliss.
And this type of transhumanism that concern itself with that is the type of hedonistic transhumanism. Now, personally, I am not a hedonistic transhumanist for the very simple reason that I am not a hedonist. And what I mean by that is not necessarily that pleasure is a bad thing. No, I think in a lot of cases pleasure can be a very, very good thing. A lot of us are seeking pleasures for understandable reasons, and so do I. But I do not believe that pleasure is the highest good. I don't think it was highest on the hierarchy of value. A lot of the time I think that this whole concept of eternal bliss, which usually refers to the constant stream of pleasure and happiness, or what in transhumanist circles is often referred to as super happiness, I think it's very dystopian. Actually, I think this is the type of world that reminds me of Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. I think that happiness and pleasure loses its value when it is not something that is a reward, but rather is just a normal state of being. I think that sounds absolutely horrible. So what the myth would be is that all transhumanists have eternal bliss as a goal. That is obviously not true, but it is true that some transhumanists do have this type of goal in mind. The goal which I personally don't necessarily agree with. Myth number 4. It's playing God. Now this one I find very, very interesting personally, because a lot of this type of criticism comes from Christians or Christian conservatives. But here's the thing about it. Any big scientific or technological breakthrough that has happened throughout the human history has had someone in the background screaming, "This is playing God." That was the case with the steam engine, that was the case with electricity, and so on and so on, gene technology obviously. So if we really started believing in that, all of us, we wouldn't really be making any progress at all. And besides, is it really playing God? And a lot of the time this argument is also constructed in different ways. That is, we're messing with nature, right? And well, what does that mean, we are messing with nature? We have been transforming nature since the moment we started to learn to use simple tools. In some way, we have always been transforming nature. Of course, we are doing it in a much higher scale, on a much higher level right now, because we have evolved technologically quite a lot since then. But in some way or form, we have always been doing that, and it's not necessarily a negative thing. We're also not the only animals on this planet that are transforming nature. Beavers, for example, the dams that are creating, they are transforming nature. But how does that apply to the idea of playing God? I don't think doing anything technological, and most human activity is technological, right? I differentiate between two different types of technological activity, and that is engaging with technology and further developing technology. When we think about it as playing God, we applying this sort of mentality that we are doing something unnatural, something beyond our nature. I prefer to see it as living up to our potential, because those things exist within our potential. Another reason why I think it has absolutely nothing to do with playing God is because we are doing nothing godlike in the process. Or if you think about this sort of biblical creation, right, what God is capable of doing, like creating something out of nothing, right, like that is a capability accessible only to God. Whether God is, an actual existing divine form that you believe in, or just as a concept. What we as humans are doing is nothing really alike. What we are actually doing is what in classical Greek terms would be called Techne or poiesis. And what is Techne or poiesis is really about transforming or morphing nature into something new. We use available materials and we are fusing them into something new, and sometimes developing it further from that new existing substance. Participating in this kind of activity is it's a very human activity. We are doing something very human with that. There's nothing godlike about it. That's why I refuse to call it playing God. And even if we were, I also think that if God exists, I think he would want us to achieve our maximum potential. If you have, as a father or mother, if you have kids, you likely want your kids to live up to their full potential. Why wouldn't God want people to achieve a maximum of their potential? And I think by doing so, we might also be more likely to understand God. I think that this could bring us closer to God. Now, I'm not a Christian myself, but I really like this concept, and there are some Christian transhumanists there as well, and I think they may relate to what I just said. Myth number 5. Transhumanism is science fiction. Now, what exactly do we mean by science fiction? And what I think a lot of the time when people say that transhumanism exists within the realms of science fiction, what they actually mean that it is unachievable, that there are certain limits to how far we can go, and well, this is something we can never do. Or the other type of mentality with the science fiction realm is that this is something not relevant yet. And I think that both cases are wrong. I think that a lot of people have this sort of limitation to how far they can think when it comes to technological development. We are living within the frames of what we have available today, and we might be contemplating of how much changes will happen in the next 20, 30, maybe 50 years, right? But if I lived in, let's say, 1457, and I was to tell someone that, you know what, I think one day it will be possible to travel from Italy to Japan in just 12 hours, I would be laughed off. People would call me absolutely insane. Yet, look where we are today, right? And for a lot of people, it's just impossible to imagine such thing. Another thing about science fiction is that novels and films that were considered science fiction in the past are now just reality. And it's not necessarily that science fiction novels or science fiction films were prophetic in any way. And a lot of the time we like to think, oh, they predicted the future. A lot of the time I actually think that some ideas from those books and films are actually being implemented. It's like we have certain ideas about the future, and that's how we build the means to actually create the sort of future we imagine. And this is, you know, how we are capable of actually creating this sort of future for ourselves when we achieve enough technology and knowledge to have the means to do that. But we take a lot of inspiration from those ideas. But then let's go to the second argument, that it is science fiction in the sense that it is not relevant to today, for today's societies, for people who are alive right now. Well, we have already made some significant advances in gene technology, gene therapy, and of course, you know, this is a very early process. We have a long way to go. But, you know, we are already able to repair parts of our DNA at this point, and just imagine something that I think would be a genuine possibility in very near future, and those are artificial organs. And of course I think the heart would be the simplest artificial organ to make, since it has a pretty simple function compared to many other organs we have in our body. It's pumping blood, right? I mean, it circulates throughout your body, creating the sort of pump that we can just put in here in us. Would be a great solution. It could be life-saving. But yeah, a lot of people at that point would say we are cyborgs, right? And a lot of the time when we talk in cyborgs, we are thinking the sort of hybrid of a man and a machine. And I don't think we really would be a hybrid. I think we're still 100% human. And let me tell you why. Well, biologically speaking, a hybrid exists on a genetic level. It's a genetic mix of two different types of beings. We're not really merging with a machine, rather we're using technology to our advantage to either fix or improve ourselves. In some ways, my phone is kind of already a part of me at this point. Like, without my phone, at this point I wouldn't be able to tell you what is the population of let's say Paris, but I can just Google it and I know it, right? It's a expansion of my memory, my mind. I have knowledge easily accessible for me. This is already an extension of myself. Now, of course, this is an external device, but now imagine an internal device that has a similar function. Okay, so I'm cutting in here in the middle of the editing process because I noticed there's one important thing I didn't mention, and that is the danger of calling the possibility of transhumanism as just sci-fi, because then we are not taking the possibility of new technologies developing and we're just dismissing it as sci-fi. By doing that, we are not taking the issue seriously, and because of that we will not be prepared for the future. And I think it's really important to think ahead, to think long term, to prepare ourselves for the future technology. And our ideas of future technologies are not just pure speculations. Those developments are already happening, we are already moving in that direction, and disregarding it as just pure sci-fi may actually be dangerous, because when we are not prepared for what's happening, it might be too late. We need to know where we are heading. Myth number 6. Transhumanists are ignoring the negative aspects of technology. So, are there some people out there who are denying or are ignorant towards the negative impact of technology? Well, yeah, people like that exist. Being a transhumanist is not necessarily synonymous with being a technophile. Now, I do not think that absolutely everything about technology is fantastic. I do not believe that technology is our savior or anything like that, but I think we can make technology beneficial. Actually, you know, in many ways, as a transhumanist, I am concerned with the negative impact and negative aspects of technology to a higher degree than many other people, because I spend a lot of my time writing about technology, researching about technology and technological development. So I'm very, very concerned with those dangers. I will not ignore the fact that internet, while also having a lot of the positive impact, also has had some negative impact on society. I think that internet helped amplify more extreme political voices, which I don't think is a good thing. I think that some forms of videos, such as shorts, may have a negative impact on attention span of young people. Obviously, you know, the 20th century introduced us to a lot of machines of war that took a lot of lives, and the atomic bomb. I don't think of any of that as positive, and I myself am very concerned with the development of AI. Actually, the reason why I'm concerned with the dangers of AI is the reason why I think we should be upgrading ourselves to survive in the future. And also, I really want to make sure that the technology we are creating and those steps we are taking towards that progress are actually thought through, reasonable, that we do not just rush into things blindly. I don't think we should be lemmings just falling off the cliff. We need to look where we're heading, we need to analyze the situation, we need to have a proper analytical, ethical, philosophical look at what technology is, at its the core and the essence of its nature, its limits and its potential. We need to understand it properly in order to make sure that the technology we are developing is beneficial for us and is not harmful to us, the environment, and the non-human creatures and other animals. Myth number 7. Transhumanists are trans activists. Now, this one I find really funny. I think it's the trans part. So it has happened on some occasions when I told someone I'm a transhumanist, and they told me, why won't you just stop shouting and demand that people call you with those weird pronouns? You're conflating something here, my friend. And besides, also this view of trans activists is also something that is to a very high degree propagated by the media. Let's move that aside, because this is not something I want to talk about in this video. I have talked about the trans subjects in quite many of my videos, but we're talking about transhumanism here. No, transhumanists are not trans activists. They can be, but they don't have to be. There's also another type of, it's almost a conspiracy theory, really, but that's that trans activists or trans people are transhumanists. And in that sense, you know, transhumanism gets used in a very negative way, and I think that's part of the problem. Like, it shouldn't be used in that negative way a lot of the time. But anyway, I had this conversation with a friend of mine not long ago who's transgender. Told me that this local trans organization gets accused of being transhumanist because they use the term trans person instead of transhuman. So it means that they're no longer human, or they want people to stop being human. So it's type of posthumanism. It makes absolutely zero sense. And even if they called themselves transhumans, that's even more reasons why they would be accused of being transhumanists. You know, I mean, some people are just crazy. But is there a correlation between transgenderism and transhumanism? In some ways, yes. I think, in fact, that the trans thing is a type of transhumanism, or at least a form of that. Mainly because, well, it is an attempt to sort of transcend our biological limits and our biological reality, but making that jump between sexes. Of course, where we stand today, it's not really possible to actually change your sex. I like to contemplate whether it will be possible in the future or not, but at this point we are just learning to crawl in that field. But I think it's a step towards overcoming and transcending our biological limitations, which is something transhumanism is all about. But it's also more about the autonomy, right? And I think that in the future, if those methods can be more safe, if they can be reversible, I think that will be something that allows people a lot more autonomy over their bodies, which I do not necessarily think is a bad thing. Myth number 8, which is the final one. Transhumanists hate being human. Again, I think what we can see here is that more and more people are conflating transhumanism with posthumanism, that we want to be machines, and actually, I love being human. I love being human, and that is part of the reason why I want to improve the health and the life of and ability of humanity. I want people to live in better conditions. I want people to be happier. I want more people to have the possibility to live up to their potential. My interest in transhumanism is mostly based on the fact that I love being human and that I love humans. I love humanity. This argument or misconception often comes with another argument, and that is that transhumanists are really fearing death, or are what's called necrophobic. You know, again, I can only speak from my own perspective here. I used to fear death for a large portion of my life, actually, long before I even entertained transhumanism. Because I think the first time I started to entertain transhumanism was actually around the time when I was detransitioning, so like 2015, something like that. Of course, I always had a lot of interest in technological progress and technology and artificial intelligence and so on, but it was around that time when the transhumanism started to appeal to me more and more. But I feared death long before that. I had childhood trauma associated with death. But the longer I live, the less I fear death. Mostly because I view consciousness in the same way as I view energy, right? Like the energy cannot end and cannot come from nothing. It is an endless circulation, and I view consciousness in that same way. I think there is an endless circulation of consciousness in the universe. I think that consciousness is one of the three main substances in the universe, like energy, matter, consciousness. So I don't really fear death anymore, at least not in the standard sense that is an intense fear, but I think that to some degree everyone fears death. And no matter if you're transhumanists or not. And you might be thinking you don't fear death. But if I were to tell you right now that you have 1 hour left to live, most of you will at that point feel an intense and heavy and oppressive feeling of fear and panic. And that's normal. Actually, I think that if you didn't feel that, I think there's something unnatural about you. And that comes from a transhumanist. It would be equivalent to an antelope who's just standing there, not running away when the cheetah's running towards that antelope. That antelope's just like, yeah, you know what, I'm gonna stand and chill here. I consider that sort of mentality sort of suicidal. So I think in many ways everyone fears death. But what I think the myth is really about here is that the fear of death is the driving force for many transhumanists. And this one I actually think may be true. This one is actually something I may be agreeing with. But is it necessarily a negative thing to wish to overcome death? I don't think so. Like, if you think about it, too many people are dying young. Too many people are dying from illness. Too many people are dying from hunger and poverty and war. And I think too many people are also dying from old age, what I don't think should be a necessity. We think of it as a necessity because we have been programmed that this is the right way to go about it. Like, it's a good thing to die. Well, as someone who has lost my grandmother last year, it's not a good thing for someone to die. You wouldn't want to wish that on your close ones, right? And oh, I would be happy if they could live forever, or if they could themselves decide when they wish to end their existence. Like, oh, you know what, I think I lived long enough, I think I achieved enough, like I fulfilled my goal, this no longer gives me meaning, so I wish to end my existence at that point. And I think this sort of autonomy is beautiful. Anyway, oh, I was talking about this much longer than I thought. I thought the video is going to be like 15 minutes long. I think it's much longer than that. No, I'm not sure how long it was, but I talked and 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 talked, because that's what I do. I talk a lot on this channel, but well, if I didn't talk, probably you wouldn't want to watch it anyway. But if you think I talk too much and sometimes I just shut up, let me know, because a lot of people tell me that in real life, believe it or not. Anyway, I hope you have a good day or evening, or whatever it is, wherever you are, and take good care of yourself, and I will see you in the next video. Ciao.